Hi, I'd like to welcome you to Discipleship track number 2 from Student Devos. Now, in this discipleship track, we're going to talk about who God is. So, I want you to start off by thinking about if you were asked to introduce God to one of your friends, what would you say? How would you describe him? What would you say his characteristics are? Or what makes him cool? How would you describe God to someone else? Well, in this lesson, we're going to talk about a part of God, and that is the fact that God is love. And so we're going to look at how God is love. And the first thing we're going to look at is how God's love is big. And so to get us kind of started off with this, I want to tell a story about a time that I saw a giant truck shaped like a hot dog in the parking lot of a store. Now, this was huge. This was a giant hot dog, basically, on wheels. And it was crazy. I had never seen anything like it before. And so, of course, I wanted to tell others about it because it was unusual. It was cool. No one else had probably seen, a crazy giant hot dog that could drive down the street. And so when I went to go tell my other friends about this giant hot dog that was also a truck, I had to use examples to compare it to, for them to be able to understand how this was so cool and so big and whatever. I had to say things like, I saw this giant hot dog that was bigger than a truck. And I had to talk about how it had wheels and that someone was just driving it around. And so to really describe it and get my friends and people that I knew to understand how crazy this hot dog truck thing was that I saw, I had to compare the size of it to other things that they knew about, to other things they understood, so that they could really understand how crazy it was to see a hot dog this big. Well, that's kind of what Paul does in Ephesians. In Ephesians chapter 3, verses 16 through 19, Paul is praying, and he prays in this prayer that we would be able to understand how big God's love really is. So I'm going to read those verses to you. It's Ephesians 3, 16 through 19 out of the Message. And it says, I pray that from his glorious, unlimited resources, he will empower you with inner strength through his Spirit. Then Christ will make his home in your hearts as you trust in him. Your roots will grow down into God's love and keep you strong. And this is the verse I like, so I got this for you if you want to read along. It says, and may you have the power to understand, as all God's people should, how wide, how long, how high, and how deep his love is. So Paul is praying there, and he's praying that we would be able to understand how big God's love really is. And I think that's pretty amazing. I think it's pretty cool, the fact that Paul is just asking that we would be able to understand it. To me, that says that Paul didn't have anything to compare the love of God to. Like when I saw the hot dog truck, I could say I saw a hot dog that was the size of a truck. People could understand that because they had something to compare it to. Well, Paul didn't have anything to compare the love of God to. He didn't say that God's love is like the size of the sea, or maybe, God's love is like the size of the moon. He just prayed that we'd be able to just even understand or comprehend how big God's love is. So that really, to me, shows that God's love is really, really big. And so the question that brings then is, how does knowing God's love help us live our lives? Well, I've got a couple things that I believe it helps us do. First, I believe that knowing how big God's love is helps us love others. See, when we know God's love, when we know how much he loves us, then it helps us be able to love others more. It's like God has given us the love to be able to love others with. Because he loved us first, we can turn around then and love others. The second thing that knowing God's love does for us is it really helps us love God more. See, when we begin to understand how much God loves us, when we begin to understand how great of a price God paid to have a friendship, to have a relationship with us. It makes us be able to love God more. It helps us love God more because we're not loving God out of, being forced to, or out of we ought to, or we should love him. When we realize how much he loved us, it becomes easy to respond back to him in love. It becomes easier, and it helps us really just want to love him more, want to do more for him, and want to really have a relationship with him. So an awesome thing about God is the fact that he's love. And his love is so big, it's so wide, it's so deep that Paul prays that we can just be able to understand it, be able to comprehend how great his love is. And so I encourage you to just really begin to read this verse, Ephesians chapter 3, verses 16 through 19, and really spend time thinking about it, thinking about the fact that God's love is so big. And I encourage you because it'll really revolutionize your life.